But and I'll give you like some things that I think about. Be curious about your reaction. Like when I think of the value of the and let I'm not let me not overstate myself in terms of like fights, but I've been in some fights in my life, right? So I've had some fight, and the value of those fights early on was the first value was to show me if somebody punches me in the face, I do not die. Like I shouldn't be so afraid of that
An
to
important lesson for a young boy to have.
it was a very important lesson. I was I was a New Yorker out west. I was picked, there's a lot of reasons in which I needed to know that people come to push me around, that I didn't have to tolerate that per se. Um, and I think it gave me a sort of resilience in other ways that I don't know I could have got without someone punching me in the face and me being to live to tell the tale. I live in Arizona, and locally there was a teenage little group of boys, and they beat to death a kid in the last year or so. So it's outside it was a house party. Outside the house party, they beat this kid to death, and I had I've been in I feel like some meaningful street confrontations in that. Um, and maybe some that could have bounced in that particular direction, but mostly not, I would say. And so it's hard for me to think of I don't live in a community where that survival instinct is something that is required to get down to the grocery store and back. Like this is a pretty
You're
peaceful
talking about
suburbia.
what you're referencing is what is at the forefront, right? You're talking about prefrontal cortex. Like you're thinking in
Yes.
my neighborhood, I don't need this. Your genetics aren't.
Right.
They're separate, right? Your amygdala response is not related to, oh, I live in a really nice area. I'm in Mesa and it's very comfortable and casual and this
Right.
is
Right.
happening. So when you see something or experiencing something, it's not in isolation, right? So you might feel like, yes, I can just rationalize through this and I'm good. You can have a different survival response, right? So if you think about a situation where maybe you have auditory exclusion or you have some type
Yeah.
of
Right.
temporal impairment, or you start to lose some of your fine motor skill or pulling of the blood to your chest, or maybe you get a little shortness of breath, could be anxiety. Um, those things you didn't choose. And the fact that you're in a relatively safe environment doesn't stop those things from occurring,
I agree.
right?
So let me ask you a real specific question because I tell you that story with this question in mind. I feel like to a certain extent, my street fighting experiences were an inoculation for more street fighting experiences. Like they were violent enough, but they weren't so violent that I didn't survive them, and they weren't so violent that carried some injury for their. And it also showed me that like you don't want to continue down this road because you just become increasingly more lethal. So I'm wondering this, Professor Todd, in this time when we are reducing the friction between boys in particular, that do you think that there's um, maybe less of that with an absence of that mid ground of violence where it's more than pushing, but you didn't kill somebody? Does that lead to things like this where now someone's violent and they don't have any experience with it, and now they're just taking it to their amygdala's in control and they're murderers now at 17? Or am I making that too much of that
Yeah,
dynamic? And,
so those are not completely isolated instances, and I had one where I live. It happened to be with a female,
mm,
uh, and she had fought another girl, and there were a group of girls there that were present, and she ended up in a coma with
mm,
severe brain damage and all
okay,
kinds of
yeah,
stuff. These are not completely I said, but they don't happen that frequently, and I think
right.
in a different time, maybe they would have. So we've gone away from that. I think if you attempt to de-escalate, that's a great approach to start. But the problem with de-escalation is that you're not the only person that has a say in it.
Right.